Okay, I'm delighted to be joined in the downtown den now by Dougal Paver from Merry and Strategy. Dougal, good day to you.
Good morning.
And how are you finding this new way of working that we're all having to adapt to?
Interesting. I think my clients are struggling more to adapt it than I am, to be fair. You know, I've been working from home for 6 years, so the only difference for me is having the kids around my feet. It poses its own issues. But generally getting through it, it's the half speed that everyone seems to be working at that's the issue.
Yeah.
It's trying to keep going at pace.
Yeah. I suppose although you do work at home, in that your office is home, you, like me, you like to be out and about, you like meeting people, you do an awful lot of your work face to face. So has that proven a bit of a challenge to you?
Yeah, you know, the lack of visibility and the lack of human contact is an issue. So I'm having to make sure that I'm on top of technology like this, make sure I'm making special calls every day so I can see and feel in a technical sense people, and they can do likewise with me. It's, you know, that's a period of adjustments, but people are getting their heads around it now, and we're getting moving.
Yeah. So the reason that we wanted to have a chat to you today is you very kindly wrote a blog for us last week in terms of the implications financially of what the Chancellor announced for those who are self-employed. And of course, you fit into that category. And we got an awful lot of interest from that blog. So we just wanted to follow that up with the chat. And I think both of us would concede that the Chancellor actually has done an exceptional job in very challenging circumstances. Nonetheless, when you start to look at the detail of some of those announcements, the one to do with self-employed in particular, this idea that people have got to hang around until June does seem to me somewhat difficult. I know it's going to be different for people in different circumstances. And of course, where you're in a family where somebody else has got a job in the public sector, for example, or whatever it might be, then it may be more manageable. But do you think that he needs to relook at the situation with self-employed? Because certainly we're getting an awful lot of calls, Dougal, from people saying June is just probably a month too long for us to hang on.
Too long, yeah. I think he does, and I think he needs to do it in two ways, really. Firstly, you're quite right. He's doing a great job in very trying circumstances, and a lot of credit is due to him there. He's taking away a lot of worry. The thing that struck me about his proposals for the self-employed was that it left out a sizable chunk of people who are working for limited companies because they need to do so for the protection that gives them. And if their earnings are above a certain level, there's nothing in it for them. Now they will be higher taxpayers, so they're paying substantially more potentially, but getting no help at all. And that's there's an issue of fairness, if you will, there that perhaps he needs to address. And I know there's a cross-party group of MPs who've highlighted that and are now discussing that with him. So one would hope that as more detail is fleshed out, that perhaps that's adjusted, because that could cause problems. But I think the point you make is closer to the knuckle for many self-employed people, which is the one around when the cash actually starts flowing. You know, a lot of self-employed people are working hard and well and thriving to whatever degree, paying their bills, their mortgages, their other commitments, but they don't necessarily have a lot of fat around them financially. And having to hang on for 2 or 3 months, particularly if clients are either retrenching or just closing up shop, is a major problem. There will be a lot of self-employed people who will see their income just going up in smoke, and it's not certain that whatever the Chancellor is promising is enough to replace that, and the cash flow delays could be a real issue.
Yeah, and I think that goes probably across the board, but with self-employed people, I think it's more urgent because, as you rightly say, there's an awful lot of people, you're not in this situation, I know, but there are an awful lot of people who are in that position where their income will have dried up very quickly and very substantially in a very short period of time. And let's face it, Dougal, nobody was prepared for this, were they?
No, nobody was. The governments weren't. Business wasn't. We certainly don't think in these terms, do we? Business people, by general definition, are optimistic, forward-looking, and are focused on their customers and their markets. They're not focused on global geopolitical issues, particularly SMEs. It's not how we function or think, is it? No. So, he's doing the best of he can, but it may well be that it's not enough. And there's 5 million self-employed people in the UK. That's a lot of people. And, what will be left of us when we come out the tunnel, when we get through this, as we will, what will the landscape be like? People will be using up savings. They'll be incurring debt to keep going. What room will there be in the overall SME economy to sort of get back and motoring? You can see that people will probably have to rein their horns in on all sorts of discretionary spending, which will hit lots of other SMEs, whether that's restaurants or bars or other service providers of any stripe. There's going to be a lot less money flowing around because there's going to be debt to be repaid and there's going to be finances to be rebuilt. It's going to be tricky.
Yeah. If we can just sort of jump a couple of months ahead and hopefully, as you rightly say, come through this and be able to look forward with some optimism. What are the sort of things do you think that businesses should be doing to develop some resilience? And importantly, what should our politicians at a local and regional level be trying to do to intervene and make life a little bit easier for those SMEs going forward?
Okay. I think we've got to all keep in touch with our marketplace, and downtown has always been a fantastic conduit, hasn't it, for small businesses to stay in touch and build a presence in different market spaces, whether that's geographically or in terms of sectors. We've just got to keep that going, and we've just got to be smarter technically and stay visible. The Lord invented telephones on the 8th day, and on the 9th he gave us the internet. So let's make full use of both of those things. We simply have to. Invisibility is the death of SMEs, isn't it? So that's important. In terms of what local authorities can do, they've probably got limited bandwidth, really. Things like rate support for small businesses will be really important. Rates holidays, rent holidays if the council are owning properties. If they have the capacity, offering some sort of grants for people in certain circumstances would help. And I do note, I got an email this morning from a networking group I'm in with a link to Liverpool Council's latest announcements on that, which was great, very encouraging and good for the council, I have to say. So we're going to have to look at those things, and the council can help, but I'm just not sure how much bandwidth they have. Back in the day, we were promised that there'd be much more devolution to local authorities, but perhaps this is an essential test of that, and perhaps we'll come out of this thinking, you know what, it didn't happen at the level we wanted it to, and it now needs to.
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the things that we've raised. We think that as far as they've been able to, with the resources available to them, that actually the local reaction across the country has been pretty good. But of course, the speed with which we would want to see that response hasn't quite been there because of that lack of resource and cash. So it is probably something that we'll be turning our attention to when we get through this. The other sector that I know you're keenly interested in, Dougal, is construction. And again, earlier this week, I raised some concerns about some bad press that some construction companies were getting. I felt unfairly because they're actually, being told to crack on. They're really being encouraged by the workforce to crack on because a lot of those guys and girls are self-employed. And therefore they're looking at June and thinking we can't survive until June, so we need to continue to work. And of course, coupled with the fact that the government haven't been firm in saying that construction isn't a key industry sector, then I thought they were left a little bit hung out to dry. And we've sort of called on the government to make a bit of a clearer statement on construction, but equally we've said to our local decision makers and politicians, be a bit more careful in terms of the criticism that you're making. So as I say, I know that you represent a number of those people. What's the feedback you're getting from that sector?
They'd welcome more clarity, but these are smart guys, and they're good employers. So the people I work for have close their sites temporarily whilst they work out how can they manage a work schedule that guarantees their workers safety in terms of distance and everything else, whilst keeping the jobs going. They're conscious of the need to keep working. Their self-employed subcontractors are conscious of the need to pay their bills and keep earning. So for our guys, it's an issue of project management and scheduling and being smart around that. And that's the challenge. And they're starting to work through it. So I had a conversation yesterday with a contractor client of mine who's restarted work after a week on a site in Liverpool. And of course, work will go slower because of the need for fewer workers, because of the need for distance, but he's cracking on. So good employers who care about their workforce and their subcontractors will find a way through this. It's not beyond the wit of man.
Yeah. And like you, Dougal, I'm aware that they're going the extra mile to ensure that the safety of the workforce is paramount. And, you know, all I'm looking for really is recognition of that fact that, you know, because again, this can quickly turn, can't it? When people see guys going to work, the public do have a tendency to listen to some of the headline messages and take their lead from our politicians. And therefore, it's important that they get their language, their narrative right during this period of time.
Speaking as a PR person, it's been very interesting seeing the contrast between different media and those who have taken quite a steady line, almost of responsibility. Look, this is a national crisis. We need to be calm and factual. And those who have reveled in the headlines, shall we say, and written headlines that perhaps haven't been as responsible as they ought, really. You know, we've all got a job of work to do here to get our nation through this. And to be fair, most people are trying to do the right thing. But we have to have an economy to return to. We have to have an economy that's capable of functioning and pulling us out of this, because right now it's tanking, inevitably. On the development side, people are keeping going to a degree because development is a long game and there's a lot of work that can be done from home to keep projects moving forward, which is great. So I'm staying busy, lovely. But on the day-to-day delivery side, particularly on construction sites, we'll discuss that, and a lot of sites are having to close while they work out what to do. So, you know, we have to keep going. You know, there has to be something to return to, doesn't there? And it's a very difficult balancing act. You need the wisdom of Job here. You really do. And I don't envy politicians of any stripe here.
Yeah. And just final point, Dougal, you say you keep them busy. Tell us a little bit about what Merion Strategy do, and tell us how you're going to ensure that over the next few months you're able to give your very, very sage advice to the clients that you deal with.
So I advise people in the property supply chain, from funders and developers at the top of the chain, all the way through architects, planning consultants, contractors, right through the supply chain. So the built environment is my world, and I provide marketing and public affairs advice to them. Now, what would I say to them going forward? I would say keep communicating through this. Stay in touch with all your stakeholders. Do what you can to help your stakeholders, because when we come out of this, people will remember who helped them, who was constructive, who was useful, and who stayed in the game. And by a flip coin, they'll remember who wasn't any of those things. So keep talking, be as helpful and constructive as you can, and we'll get through this.
And I thought the point that you made earlier, Dougal, was a crucial one. Invisibility is what will kill an SME at the moment, isn't it? You and I, sadly, both old enough to remember the 2008 crash. And again, recognised where people had cut back on the things that probably would be the first things that you'd think of cutting back on. But, you know, market and spend and PR and visibility, they were the companies that either didn't come out of the recession or came out of it far slower than those who maintained some sort of profile during that period.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, you know, I'm lucky I've got clients who are long enough in the tooth, shall we say, who've been around the block a few times, who understand that point. You know, they've lived through recessions, and, you know, the construction and development sector is a bellwether. So it's always first in to a recession, and it's always first out. And you want to be a company that can get out from the blocks quickly, to take advantage of the opportunities that will flow. Luckily, I've got clients who think like that. So touch wood, we'll be all right.
Yeah, great stuff. Always good to chat to you. I was reminded earlier on that it's the 50th anniversary today of Everton Football Club winning the championship in 1970. Now, you weren't old enough to be there.
I was in my mother's arms.
Yeah, I was actually in the Gladys Street in my dad's arms, would you believe?
Fantastic.
And I just, you know, on a serious note, wondered what your thinking was around the Premier League. And I'm not going to get into the arguments as to who should win it, because I think that's fairly clear to all of us. You know, that even as a bit of blue, I don't think we could deny Liverpool the title.
No.
But again, you mentioned about the PR positions that particular brands and people are taking. I noticed that you were quite critical, rightly so, of Richard Branson, who's usually a master of PR.
Yeah, seems a lost his touch.
Yeah, but I'm starting to pick up some comments and negativity around the way Premier League clubs are handling this crisis, because, of course, what they're doing is furloughing a lot of their staff, which means government handouts for them. But of course, they're still paying their multi-million-pound players top dollar. And I do wonder how that's going to play out in the short to medium term, Dougal.
Very, very badly. The optics are really, really poor. You can't say we are a vital part of our community and then let the community carry a burden that you're not prepared to carry yourself. End of discussion. The Premier League are running headlong into a PR disaster. I had a conversation with my wife yesterday about renewing our 3 Everton season tickets, and put it this way, she resorted to Anglo-Saxon vernacular, which wasn't good, because she's a very measured lady, Mrs. Paver, let me tell you. I think they're getting it, collectively, they're getting it very badly wrong. Okay. And it worries me, because I love football and I love my club. And I'm not talking about Everton here, I'm talking about the industry as a whole. Yeah. And then there's the optics around what's happening to the lower leagues. And as things currently stand, the absence of help from the Premier League, not good. I don't know how they're going to emerge from this.
Yeah. It's an interesting take, Dougal. And again, I would suggest to you that perhaps as we go through this period of almost getting used to not going to the game, people very quickly develop new habits, don't they? And it's whether, I mean, listen, if you like your family, this isn't too bad a period of time. And you know, you might come to the conclusion in a few months' time, well, actually, that Saturday, Sunday, Monday or Friday, whenever the Sky decide to play these games now, and that's already a cause that concerns and pisses me right off when I get the 2 weeks before you made all your arrangements and all of a sudden the game gets moved for television. But that's another challenge, isn't it? That, you know, it's a very customer-led product, is football. And as I say, at the moment, we're through no fault of our own, but we're breaking that habit.
Yeah, I've got my lad, who's 13, into watching vintage Everton videos to keep him fully, you know, blooded in all things blue. You know, he asked me a wonderful question the other day. He said, great. So that prompted a long conversation. So he's busy working his way through the 1985 season. He said, Dad, he said, we beat Norwich 2-0. It was brilliant. But to get to your point, you're right. You know, he's 13. He loves it all, and he'll go back when he can. But my 11-year-old daughter, who sits with us, has a season ticket. She could take it or leave it. And you know, we want to bring that younger generation through, and it'll be tricky for them. It will, and we'll see that reflected in attendances going forward. I think Everton will be protected in season ticket terms because everyone wants to preserve their place in time for Bramley Moor. Yes. No one wants to give their seat up now with a 15,000 waiting list to give their seat up. And that was the only thing that helped me win the argument with Mrs. Paver, let me tell you, about renewals. It wasn't for that. And the potential disappointment for the kids. Yeah. She wouldn't have gone with it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you're still going to be on the terraces when we do finally return to Premier League action. It's been great talking to you, Dougal, and no doubt I'll speak to you again soon during this period that we're in lockdown.
Thanks, Frank. Enjoyed talking to you.
Lovely. Cheers, mate. Catch you soon.